The AFP is reporting on a really interesting story about the far right in Germany. They say, quote, German police arrested 4 people on Wednesday who were accused of belonging to a far-right terror organization that acquired explosives for attacks on Muslims and refugee homes. The arrests occurred with the country already on edge after authorities last week said they foiled a planned Islamist attack by a German-Turkish couple armed with a pipe bomb and other weapons. So let's pause here real quick and just take note of the insane situation that is currently arising in Germany. So you have, there was a planned attack by a German-Turkish couple. They were an Islamist group, and they were going to essentially do a terrorist attack in the name of their ideology. But then you have, in response to that, or retaliation to that, you have right-wing terrorists coming out of the woodworks and essentially doing the same thing back at Muslims in the name of their extremist neo-Nazi ideology. So we have dueling camps of extremism here. You have fundamentalist Muslims trying to impose their beliefs, and you have far-right neo-Nazis attempting to impose their beliefs. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a fan of either one. We continue here, they say. They also came amid a rise in the attacks on lodgings for asylum seekers as Germany takes in record numbers of people fleeing from conflicts in the Middle East. The 4 suspects are accused of starting a far-right terrorist organization called Old School Society with a larger group of people last November. The group has an emblem featuring a tank and neo-Nazi symbols. The aim of the organization was to mount in smaller groups attacks on well-known Salafists, mosques, and hostels for asylum seekers in Germany. They say German investigators have been on high alert for violent far-right groups since it emerged in 2011 that a neo-Nazi cell calling itself National Socialist Underground allegedly gunned down 10 people, mainly Turkish immigrants, between 2000 and 2007. Meanwhile, violence against refugee shelters is on the rise. 25 such homes have been attacked since the start of the year, including 3 with fire bombings. So, for those of you who aren't aware of this situation, there was a recent Vice documentary where they went to Germany specifically and they followed around these right-wing, I think it was soccer hooligans, who have ties to neo-Nazi groups and they're vehemently anti-Muslim. And the sense that you got, if you watch that full documentary, you get a real understanding of what's going on there. And my takeaway from it is this. You have what's now rising in popularity, far right-wing groups, neo-Nazi groups, essentially neo-fascists, who are becoming more and more violent, more and more extreme, and they're starting to do, terrorist attacks like this. You have them doing a backlash to what they view as the total Muslim takeover of Europe. Now, in reality, that's not happening. So, yes, it is true that there are people fleeing from the Middle East and in some cases North Africa to Europe. And it is true that in some cases you do have fundamentalists who are setting up camp in Europe, essentially. You have Salafists. And here's the thing. You should disagree with those people and politically stand up against those people if they try to impose Islamic law in local governments or whatever it is. And you should say, hey, I'm not with them. But the problem is that in Europe, you essentially have dueling extremists. Now, of course, remember, it's not the case that, the Salafists represent all the Muslims who are in Europe. There are plenty of moderate Muslims there as well. But what you have is extremism fueling extremism. You have the rise of the far right, and you have the rise of some Islamist movements within Europe. And this is bad for everybody there. This is bad for everybody. So I don't know what the solution is, man, other than to say you got to crack down on the far right terrorist groups, and whenever they pop up, you have to crack down on the fundamentalist Muslim terror groups that might happen to do some sort of attacks. We discussed how, and again, this is in the Vice documentary, you have people who are the morality police that are standing up for a fundamentalist interpretation of Islam, that are essentially implementing Sharia on the streets in some places, where they walk around and they tell women, like, okay, you need to cover up. Why? Because I just declared myself the morality police in this region, and I have control over you. So what you need to do is you need to have a government that's active enough to fight back against the rise of the far-right terrorists, because that's a real threat and that's a real problem, and we know what happened the last time there was a far-right rise in Germany. Not saying it's going to happen again the exact same way and it's going to be as bad, because nobody's ever been as bad as the Nazis, but you have that extremist element rising up, and you also have the extremist element for Islamists rising up. So what all the moderate people need to do in Germany and all throughout Europe is reason needs to win the day, man. You need to have the more moderate parties, and you need to have the more liberal parties, and you need to have the moderate conservatives and the moderate Muslims. They all need to band together to come up with reasonable policies that are good for everybody, but policies that also crack down on the extremists in both camps. Because this is a problem that, unfortunately, my reading of the situation is that it's going to continue to grow. And in all seriousness, I think the biggest threat is probably from the far right in Germany, because they already have some level of legitimacy and mainstream acceptance. You don't have that with the fundamentalist Muslim groups. They're more on the fringes. But you have this acceptance of soccer hooliganism and neo-Nazi groups and far-right groups, and that, I think, can be a bigger threat within the establishment. So, again, the answer is to crack down on all types of extremism and to do your best to have the moderate voices and the liberal voices rule the day and win the day.